This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Good morning, it's Caroline at Teachers Talk Radio today. So welcome to this lovely Sunday early morning. Today I'm going to be talking to Tilly Brooke over at Now Press Play, passionate educator and advocate for play. She does a lot of work with Chief Operating Officer at Now Press Play and for class. So
this is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
there we go. Good morning. So I'll be talking to Tilly. I think we might have Tilly in. Are you in, Tilly?
I'm in. Good morning.
Excellent. There we go. So I just gave you a brief intro that I just got slightly cut off. So I'm sure you can give us a properly better one. So we're talking. I figured we'd meet this morning, have a nice coffee, and have a nice chat. So first up, you're passionate about play. So how did you get into this? And tell us a bit about your journey of why you're so passionate on play itself.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning to you and everybody. So I guess my background is I come from a big family, so 5 children. So you kind of had to make noise to be known. And my mum was an actress. And she then stopped being an actress because my older sister has profound and multiple learning disabilities, and I went into teaching a bit later on in her life. And for us as kids, she always still kept that element of theatricality and play. So we always had constant made up stories, lots of role play, getting things out and doing imagination play with her. And when she was at the school that I actually went to as a child as well, she created these stories called Banana Sticklebottle. And it was this little witch that would basically go into the classroom, and the children all knew about the witch, but the teachers didn't. And then the witch would do stuff to the class, and they'd go on this journey. And each child actually in the classroom would be involved in the story. So they would sit there, mouths open, kind of desperate to know what was going to happen to them in the story. If they'd become a snail that time, or a Wellington boot. So yeah, that was always there for me, and it kind of instilled a kind of love of word and being at the center of something. And then as I went through school, I followed that theatrical sense as well through secondary school as well.
So you've got I'll just round up my intro with this one. Obviously Tilly is the Chief Operating Officer at Now Press Play. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. We'll be talking about it at some point today. And she's such an incredible advocate for young people and for playing and learning through play, and she also sits on the committee of the class that I was just about to say is a charity that provides lifelong advocacy services for adults with autism or learning disabilities who cannot speak for themselves. You're a mum of 2. And recently started CrossFit. Wow, why are you doing this? Cross seriously, like, but that's something to talk about when we talk about play, the physicality of play. If you're wondering, because Caroline's that type, isn't she? If you check out the NHS itself, they have why play is important. It apparently promotes the cognitive, physical, social, emotional well-being of children and young people, including things like confidence, self-esteem, resilience, interaction, social skills, independency, curiosity, coping with challenging situations, but also really important for physical health as well: agility, stamina, coordination, balance. So it hardly surprises me that you are also into CrossFit, seeing as you love play so much. But it's a serious business, isn't it? Play. I think we don't think of it quite as serious as it should be. It's a key part of the Ofsted criteria for those early years and primaries. If you think about it, it is really mapping out the world that young people are in at that age. So really having proper play seems to be quite important for cognitive development later on, doesn't it?
I think so, and it really helps children to understand how to approach a situation, practicing something in a safe.
Oh, I think we might have. Have we got you, Tilly? I think we might have lost you for a second. Typically, we might have this experience where we might have lost Tilly and then gained Tilly. So if you bear with me 1 second, I suspect poor Tilly is still talking and not knowing that she's out. So what I'll do is I'll just let her know, and I'll give you a bit of a more of an intro on play so we can get that, and maybe we can get Tilly back in. Tilly, if you're about, you've dropped out. Do you want to get back out and come back in? Because unfortunately, I think we've just lost your signal, so we just can't hear you. So if you check back in for us, then hopefully we'll get somewhere with that. But play itself, let's just talk about play. There is obviously the developing social skills through play issue. So you can develop social skills themselves.
Battery 100%. Connected to.
And maybe we can get it. Hello, Tilly.
Oh, I don't know what happened. I'm so sorry.
Don't worry about it. It's all right. I was just going to go into a medley on play, so don't worry. It's fine. We might have just lost you for a second.
This might happen, and we might have to be a bit creative and playful. And lo and behold, it
did. Well, there we go. So don't worry about it. I was just about to go into one of my really autistic one tone monologues on play, so it's fine. Luckily enough, we've got you back. So if we have the same experience, we'll just drop in and out. So you were talking, I bet you stopped like mid-conversation there. You were talking about why we thought play was important for cognitive development.
I don't know where you heard me up until, if you heard anything I said at all.
No, I kind of missed it. So if you want to start,
I can start again from the beginning. Okay, fab. I was just saying, I think as a parent, you instinctively, from the moment your child arrives, you have to.
Oh. We might be experiencing like full-on technical issues here. I might have to do this old school. I suspect we might have lost Tilly completely.
Vans MacBook Pro 2. Van Smith's iPhone. Van Smith's iPhone.
So we... Tilly. Hello, Tilly. I think we might be hearing you again. This might be a hilarious episode where we deal with the technical issues. Hello, Tilly.
Battery 100%.
Hello. I think I've got you now.
Right.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
So we might. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Right, okay then. We'll give this another bash. If it doesn't, then we'll go to plan B, where I'll ring you. But don't worry about it. These things happen. It happens in technical issues all the time, so it's no big panic. So you were saying about play.
Yes.
Go on.
I'll try to be quick because maybe it's a sticking point. But yes, I was just saying that for me, play.
Yeah, I suspect, Tilly, we've probably got a sticking point issue here. So what I'll do is I'm going to mute you under here and I'm going to ring you in an emergency attempt here. Because I'm good like that. So if you're listening, you can hear me ringing Tilly. Hello.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening.
Don't worry. You're live on air, so I'm ringing you.
Okay, great.
So, we can have these kind of, unfortunate arrangements, which is why I've got a really, really relatively good mic to just ring you for the possibilities. So don't worry about it. It just seems to be, which is a shame because we checked you out on
We did it for half an hour yesterday and it worked like a dream.
Yeah, it did. But, these things happen. Don't worry about it. So you were explaining to us about play itself, what you think about how play is linked to cognitive development.
I just think it's a very powerful experience for children to learn through play. It enables them to put them at the centre of the learning and to think about empathy. Maybe there's a situation that they need to practice something in and being able to say yes or no and feel what that could be like, so that if they come to that point in real life, then they know kind of how they may react to it. And I think we do it instinctively with children from a very young age anyway. And as a parent, you learn to be creative and play with your children to help them to learn. And I think in school, early years that happens, and it does get less as you go higher up in the school, unfortunately.
Yeah. I feel like it does, doesn't it? Sometimes you have this moment where it feels like play becomes slightly sidelined as you go further up. And you kind of like, how did that happen? But me and you were talking earlier yesterday in our kind of pre-call to check about the subjects that do really encourage play, things like drama and some of the more creative subjects. But it does kind of get very, very narrowed into kind of break times and just general play in lunch times and those few creative subjects. Whilst I feel like it's much more of a consistent thing in the younger years, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And I was just thinking as you were saying that, because I did do drama and I went on to carry on in my early kind of adult life in theatre world, and just when you're in the theatre world, you still play. You meet, you're doing a performance and you meet a group of people who you know nothing about, and within the space of 2 weeks, you're kind of playing games and rolling over each other, and the connection that play can create between people is really strong as well emotionally. And that's why when you do a performance of a play, that group suddenly becomes so much like family to you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels very much like you've been part of that kind of. It is that social development, really, isn't it? That the NHS and the Department of Education feel is so important. You also do. I want to take us back. We'll probably come back to play. You also are part of the committee for CLASP, so you do a lot of work with adults with autism, don't you? And I want to talk just briefly about that.
Yeah, so I sit on the committee for that. So CLASP it sits under Kicking Kids, which is a group was set up by some families. And the idea is that they help support families and children who have autism and other disabilities, and kind of create respite and do they call it 2-to-1 projects, and help extend people's life experiences. And it's just a fantastic charity. And then underneath that is CLASP, which is the Kicking Kids Lifetime Advocacy Support Project. And that is a group of 30 families, and there's CLASP 1 and then CLASP 2. So CLASP 1 have helped to create another one, and would love to kind of keep creating these pockets everywhere. And the idea was that, the families who set up Kicking Kids are now hitting their 80s, and, they're passing away, and some of them don't have children. So my family's really lucky. My sister's got 4 other siblings who are really interested and want to support her, but other people don't. So an advocate is vital, because it's a connection for somebody who's going to care about their health, their support package. Working with care homes is very difficult sometimes, and they're not always open to that. I think it's just something that I think everybody should have an advocate. Unfortunately, it's not the case.
When you look at that, the level of support that we give in schools for children with SND or in this case children with autism, it is kind of like a structure that's there for young people, and it does just seem to just stop after they finish university. It's gone. And the support that you can get as a young adult is very, very limited, I find. And we really the support in SND itself, it's not a day goes by that I don't complain about that on a regular basis. But the fact that there seems to be this cliff off the edge of which you go at the end of it.
Exactly.
It's just,
I mean, you have to fight for the support when you're in the system, which is just should not be that way at all.
yeah.
And then, as you said, that kind of cliff drop off. You know, my sister's 52. She just turned 52. And there isn't that capacity. No one thinks about that, you know, but she needs to be encouraged to still learn and to still grow and develop. Otherwise, you know, with her, she doesn't have verbal communication, so very quickly people who don't know her that well can say, oh, she just sits there. And that's not the case, you know. It's really important, and that's why we worked with her advocate to say music really unlocks Jemima. She loves it. So what can we do to help enable this in the care home, because there is unfortunately a high churn of staff, and so even when you teach someone something, it's not always getting passed down. So Sarah, her advocate, is there to go and visit her, to continue that connection. She helped us to locate a music therapist. I just wish that I could help more people to have that.
Which that leads us nicely into, you know, some of the work that you do at Now Press Play. It's one of my favourite tech that you can get if you go to Bet, if you go swing round Now Press Play. How would you, for those who didn't describe it, how would you describe what Now Press Play does? Because it's like, it doesn't often feel like technology to use. And how do you find it in a classroom? It's no, if you've not seen it, it's very much a audio immersion tech for young people, and it's perfect for ASD types. Like, I absolutely love it for that reason. It's such good use. So how would you describe it, and what do you think it does for that kind of level of audio immersion?
Yeah, well, I guess we exist to inspire a love of learning in all children by engaging them in the curriculum through sound, story and movement. And I think, you know, it's really important to say everybody learns in different ways. Yeah, some people are visual learners, some people are auditory. And I think if you're going to be an effective teacher, you need to access all of those different types of learning styles to help the children in your class, because it's never a one-size-fits-all. And Now Press Play is an immersive audio resource that does enable teachers to do that. So they put the wireless headphones on, the children become the main character in the story, and they go on an educational adventure, kind of meeting people, solving problems along the way. So it's a very direct way to connect a child with what they're learning about.
Yeah, and I mean, I pitched to you as well. There's a really great study going on, if you don't know, audio immersion for ASD over at York University, actually, about how young people with autism spectrum disorder are responding to spatial audio games and audio interaction. So there's quite a lot of research going on right now about how audio immersion itself can benefit children with ASD, and for the ability to interact and actually basically come up with better communication and facilitation for language and play. So, you know, it's quite a budding level of research that at the moment, including that idea, yet again, we come back round to, of the benefits of play and immersion in those kind of imaginary worlds that kids have, don't they? You know, do you find, you know, have you got a favourite type of play that you watch or you see with kids? Like, you know, it depends, because when you see ASD kids, often they'll line up stuff. I was a great liner-upper. Do you know what I mean? When I'd line up things. You knew I was going to be a teacher from day one, because I'd line up all my toys and then tell them what was going on. Do you know what I mean? It's like the ultimate irony, isn't it? You know, but, you know, do you find, like, you know, it's there's such a thing, especially out in the research, is what's called high qualities of play. You know, that's like what type of play children have, and whether that, you know, whether you can have very kind of inclusive play. And there's been some really good stuff from the Sensory Trust as well, if you've not seen any of this, about what makes really good quality play. What's your favourite type of play?
Oh, that's such a good question. I mean, for me, like, when you're, I don't know, that's really difficult.
Isn't it?
I
It's
think
like,
when
it's like trying to pick
the
between a
children
favourite child, isn't it?
and
Really?
there's nothing that's inhibiting them, and they're just connecting, and their voices are changing, and, you know, in a sense, when I play with my children or with other children when I worked in a school, you know, you don't want to direct it too much when it's kind of. And so when they're in their world and you've kind of tipped them into it, and then watching them flourish and grow and move things around is just, it's really beautiful, isn't it?
I quite like outdoor plays. You know, Woodland Trust type outdoor plays are obviously great because it gives children the chance to practice those kind of exercise skills, get outside and, you know, see what nature's about. And you can learn so much as a science teacher, you know, being outside.
There's forest learning going on nowadays, which is good, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you have like a full variety of those kinds of areas of play and why it's so important for outdoors. But I do love those kind of pretend plays. Did you ever, like I had as most ASD kids do, I had an imaginary friend when I was a kid, like a proper full-blown.
Yes, I had an imaginary dog.
Yeah. Did you? What was your imaginary dog's name?
It was just called Dog.
Oh,
and then my sister used to fight about which one of our dogs would sit next to us in the car.
I had an imaginary friend called Mr. Munster, who used to
Mr. Munster. I love
Mr.
it.
Munster.
They're great, aren't they? Mr. Munster and Doggy.
Yeah, exactly. And he was basically responsible for everything that went wrong.
Yeah.
that was it. Everything that went wrong, it was Mr. Munster. But it's quite a you know, that's quite a common one for when I had my diagnosis process and if you know, it's quite common for children with autism, if you're talking about your charity, to have imaginary friends. So, you know, those kind of play activities can really help with kind of, you know, practice communication with your imaginary friend. I also had a stuffed toy called Mooney, who's from Mars. And yeah, I know, he looked a little bit like E.T. and I had him until I was like 20. Like, he was like the best thing ever. So I think, you know, those kinds of, you know, play objects that you get with kids and just letting them kind of engage in different things, it's really, really important. And it does help.
And if you think about this drama therapy as well.
Yeah,
like, you know,
you can.
It goes on, and art therapy, and it's about accessing things in different ways.
And I don't know whether we do value play as much as maybe we should, you know, or whether we think about that modelling out of you know, those social situations, those conversations, those schemas in their heads, you know, they're a really crucial part of being able to then learn later on. So, you know, I think when you think about play, we probably should think a bit more. I don't know. Why do you think, is it just me, or does play often not get the academic kudos that it should do?
Exactly. I don't think it does.
You know, I mean, do we often kind of dismiss play because it doesn't seem like as a serious, you know, it's not sat there like retrieval practice, is it? It's not like...
And I think it's hard to, you know, the thing that's difficult with play and the drama subjects and the art subjects is the kind of evidencing. It is very difficult to pull it through, isn't it? And I think that probably has a big impact on why it's not used as much, especially in the later years.
I think it is. I think it's quite hard to evidence what's going on with play, isn't it? You know, and I guess it's hard to kind of design studies for play. But, you know, as I said, the Children's Commission and the NHS and the DFE have a very hard line on that play is important. I'll give you some. They've got a list of play ideas. You ready? For 18 months, it's drawing, painting, sock puppets at 18 months, apparently. I like sock puppets. Dressing up, modelling, toys, and a lot on textures for children with special educational needs. So for visual impairment, toys that you can explore with your hands and things that you can hear. So, you know, there is, when you think about it, it's quite a stimulating sort of environment if you have lots of different textures and things. And if you've ever seen like a baby interact with something that they don't know, or a toddler, you know, it's quite you know, it's quite enlightening when you give them something new. Those little faces, they look at you like, what is this? It's like,
or the texture of sand on children's feet, especially if you're an inner city child, you know, sometimes they're like, I don't like this. You know, at the beach, they're like, oh my God, what is this? it's so important to bring in all those different textures and feelings and sounds.
And I think that's an interesting one as well, because that's probably why I like, woodland outdoor play for young kids, because if you can get it in, some really kind of very outdoory kinds of areas or very rural areas, it's a very different experience than from kids from a very inner city area. I've had kids do that thing where they've been in inner cities and not seen sheep or cows, and then you take them out, and then or kids that are in rural areas that city is incredibly like mind blown for them.
And noisy and can be overwhelming because everything's so big and high.
And having those kind of experiences to be able to kind of like map them out in that early age, I think is important. Building that cognitive map, I think, is an important thing to do. So now press play if you've not seen it. Go and check it out. It does give that kind of like in-depth audio immersive experience, doesn't it? I quite like it for basically ignoring things. Like a proper audio. Yeah. Being able to just zone into the kind of thing that you're trying to learn is a deep pleasure if you're on the spectrum, because obviously classrooms, we fail to kind of realise how distracting classrooms, especially if they're noisy ones or if they're not really, quite tightly managed, can be. They can be quite intense, I think.
Yeah, and schools are, like you said, they are generally noisy places. They're full of like hundreds of people, and it's important to kind of value that noise, but also I think to create a space for sounds to be heard and silence and listening.
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you get into kind of using kind of immersive audio, it helps kind of just give it a bit of a, like a little bubble world for you to learn the thing that you're learning in. I've seen plenty of kids do that thing where they come in and they've got a set of big, huge headphones on, and they're kind of like trying to zone out away from everything in an attempt to do something. All of us have experienced that. Like, can I use my headphones in the classroom, miss, because I can't concentrate, or I'm trying to get away from things. And, this is a good way to get that in a more controllable way, really.
I think that inner focus can empower children as well to just really kind of work with their own feelings and emotions and not rely on other students for that constant feedback and affirmation. Because it's coming from within you, you've got the sound bubble around you, but yet with Now Press Play, you are actively doing it with other people, so it's a bit of a it's my journey, but we're all collectively experiencing this adventure. So it's quite bonding. In a sense, the way that I was talking about theatre, for me, kind of doing that is a bonding experience.
So I think you've got kind of like, it's that kind of like immersive, you're right, like a jointly immersive bubble, isn't it? Because I worry often. I worry a bit about kids with sensory difficulties, for the simple reason that I have them. And oh my God, I do worry sometimes when it's like, how many hours can you wear a set of headphones? Like how long can you wear them for? Because like, if you've ever been like I have on a very busy train that's like on its way down to London and you're stuck on it for 4 hours and you keep a set on, you do get a bit like, oh, my ears are killing me. I need to take these off.
A bit,
And it's like, but I do wonder whether we keep control of our classrooms, tight enough at moments to provide those kind of very focused environments, because I think it's really hard to be focused if you've got a noisy room, or if you've got other people talking in a room, that's kind of like a small, low-level chitter-chatter in a room when you're trying to do something can be absolute hard work.
Yes, exactly. And I think, it's very easy to think about your classroom visually and what's going to be on the wall and how am I going to stimulate them in this corner, or in the early years they might have kind of the real world play going on in one corner and something happening somewhere else. But, can you actively think about the sound? Is there going to, if you think about Chris Dyson from Parklands or Gary Spracklen, I know that they use music in their corridors, so they've got speaker systems because they want to have a really nice ambience when the children and parents arrive, and it happens in the corridors and it's setting a tone and a mood. And how else can you use sound in your class? How do you use it sometimes with your children?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I'm quite tight with my classroom behavior, I'd probably say, so for the simple reason I tend to try and get us all to do things together. But I think I do it majoritively because I'm not very good with abiding kind of different sounds. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like either we're all together in on it or it's not going on. I think it's probably for the simple reason that I find it quite difficult. And I mean, I recanted to you yesterday, I go to I have an autism meetup group that gets together, and it's quite a big one over in Merseyside, where autistic young people and adults all get together to kind of hang out. And we all have very different ranges, but one thing that generally happens is if there is the noisy woman that goes past with the trolley of tea at some point, like everybody will be kind of like listening and talking, and then suddenly this trolley will go by and everybody stops talking. It's like nobody can talk whilst this trolley goes past to bring the tea in, for the simple reason it's just too distracting. And it's not something I think I'd ever really noticed until I was diagnosed and turned up. And I'd always found it difficult, to certain really distracting noises had stopped me dead in my tracks. But until that moment where I was sat there in the very early days and suddenly realised that the whole room had stopped talking, I didn't realise how profound that was for everybody. And then after that, it became a common thing that you'd see where everybody in the room, if there was like a bus going past that was beeping at one point, a trolley with a tea rattling along, or a quite distinct, noise, the whole room just stops having a conversation until the noise is gone. And then when the noise is gone, everybody starts again. And it just made me really think about how noise is in my classroom afterwards. And I was still teaching at that point quite full time. So it was like, you know what, actually, I'm going to really try and manipulate the noise a bit more. So I started to use a little more of it beginning, have ambient noise coming in and then make it clear the noise and stop and then have it going out. So it made it very distinct. But I do think we don't think about it as much as we think. You're right about visuals in a classroom. Everybody's done a classroom board, haven't they, for putting visuals up. And I'm not sure it even helps so much. I've even done it where I've put loads of visuals up and then afterwards I've thought later, is that a bit too overwhelming? Because, it's like...
Yeah, sometimes the less is more approach is always a winner, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll put it up and then I'll be like, right, this is supposed to be really enjoyable. Why do I hate this? It's like, do you know what I mean? And then I'll be like, I'll take it down and put less things up. And in the end, I feel like my classrooms ended up when it'd be like boxes with a label on it. It'd be, it'd start out like, oh, I want to have a really kind of nice, pretty classroom. And then it'd end up, no, I just want to have boxes with labels on them. And that'd be it. So it's kind of like, I think the environment, maybe we should think about a bit more, isn't it? What types of environments
the sound can be quite cheap and simple to access as well. There's so many free kind of FX on YouTube or programs that you can buy into, or just listening. It's a really simple thing, like if they're doing the Great Fire of London, you could play the sound of a fire crackling. Ask them to close their eyes and imagine, where are you? What can you hear? And then you start to bring in the other senses. How does it feel? Or can anyone remember sitting next to a fire? Where were you? What did that feel like? And then it really helps children to build a picture in their mind and become this creator. And when they start to share what their vision looks like in their mind, and it's different from what the child next to them is sitting like, and that's not right or wrong, it just is. That's when I think the children that sometimes struggle with a traditional read-write kind of exam type lesson where there's a good answer and a bad answer get to be winners as well. And I really like that kind of drawing on what other children have inside them.
I really I really love doing that thing of sounds of space when I'm teaching physics. It's often amazing because there's loads of kind of sounds of space out there that you can kind of look, if you're a physics teacher, guys, of exactly what Mars would sound like, or what or the moon sounds like. And it's so fascinating to really think about that, because it's not obviously somewhere that you expect sound to be, so there's loads of possibility with kind of that level. And I do wonder as well, we all had this during COVID, didn't we, where we unfortunately ended up in this period where it was, we're going to be on Zoom and we're going to talk and we're going to, put things on, and we're going to have audio and we're going to have sound and we're going to, and I don't know about you, but like I teaching it, I found it overwhelming, let alone, sitting and learning that way. Because it was a lot of things all at once, wasn't it? And in the end, I took to just doing, audio and slides in the end, and not adding to it, the visual part of trying to get my, my actual, my face on it. And then I'd limit it to just my voice at moments, so that it was not as quite as too many things to take in.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that, I wonder whether we've thought about, because we use a lot of things like audio feedback, don't we?
Yes,
I find that better than normal feedback, if you can do it, because it gives the
immediacy, doesn't it?
Yeah, and also it gives the tone and the personal effects to it. There's something very different about saying, "Wow, that was a really amazing," versus writing the "Wow, that was really amazing."
Which can be interpreted anyway if you're feeling negative about your own work. For example.
Yeah, and also, if you're not very good at reading between the lines either. You know what I mean? It's having that extra bit of, intonation and a voice can make a massive difference as well.
Definitely. So, tone, silence, pace, it really helps you to again understand and empathise, doesn't it? And figure out what we mean. And I think as teachers, you've got to model that to children as well, don't you?
Yeah. And I think
you don't always get given that in your home life necessarily. And communication is... if you can nail communication, you're going to get by in life no matter what you do.
Yeah, and I think that's another one, being able to, accurately communicate. I think, audio and thinking about how we do with play really helps. And I mean, you said there about having those environments where, you're able to practice it because you don't get it at home. I really struggle with that for the simple reason my mother's deaf. So I'm the ultimate hilarious, conundrum here, for the simple reason that my mother's deaf and my sister's deaf. So I was raised in a very deaf household, as an autistic. So there wasn't any noise anyway. So it was like, So the irony upon irony is, it was a very calm, nice household for me because nobody was making a big racket anyway. But it did mean that I had to look at people. Because obviously nobody could hear me if I wasn't looking at them. And I was quite lucky that both of them had conical hair implants, so they both can hear to some extent, but they're not very big kind of, I'd say, talkers, to say the least. So we always had a very quietish household itself. And being able to kind of practice and articulate language, I don't think I really got to grips with until much later. Because it wasn't kind of something that happened all the time, because people just didn't generally kind of chat. And it was only when much later on, when I became an aerostess, when I was much older, before I became an engineer, that one of the things they do when you're flying is they train you on tone. They have a whole training amount on tone if you're a senior aerostess. And they do it because you've got to get 472 people off a plane in less than a minute. And actually, you've got to get the tone right for that. And oh God, it was some of the best things I ever did. So next time you're on a plane, like, listen for that.
I'm going to be listening out for that, And I think for me, that's what theatre and drama has taught you as well, because you do a lot of practice on breath. Kind of, being able to project.
Well, I think a lot of the training that we had was actually from theatre and drama. So it was lots of things on, how to breathe and how to make your voice in a particular tone. And you'll hear it anytime anybody goes on a plane, if you hear the "welcome to," it's that one. If you're wondering. And every now and again, if I'm really either, things need to be in a particular way fast, I'll break out into emergency tone. Or if I need to kind of, things to be, done really pleasantly, or I'm slightly, passive aggressive in any way, I'll break into air hostess tone. You ever seen an air hostess tell somebody off? It's like,
I love it how our past lives always help us in our present. When you think, well, when will I ever use this again? And you're like, aha.
Yeah. If I'm trying to complain to somebody, you can hear it already. You're like, oh yeah, well, I wasn't really happy with this, and it's all very singy-songy for some reason, and I've never quite understood why. But I think it's kind of those kinds of things when you play around with tone in your voice, isn't it? And a teacher, one of my trainers when I was first teaching, was very much of the think about getting training for tones for your voice, or think about voice training a bit, just to see if you can get those tones right. And I think that speaks to, yet again, how much we don't, maybe we should, how do we think about audio? How do we think about that sense? Because you can do it, have better voice training to get your voice just in your tones right, and you forget how much information that goes in to do that. And I generally don't struggle to get the intonations with being on the spectrum, so for me it was like one of those things that I actively had to work for, of course. Otherwise I've got a really flat tone. If I'm not like at work or attempting to sound right, I have a proper just flat one tone number, so I have to really work hard for it so that you can hear that intonation.
And hearing intonation, kind of, if you think about audiobooks or sitting, a teacher reading a story at the end of the day in the class, or whether you're listening to, something like Now Press Play or a radio drama or an audiobook, you're getting the intonation and understanding then when I read a story, this is how I could do it, So I think that's really, really nice for children as well.
I think it is. I think what I am going to do is I'm going to move us to the news, guys, if you're here. And when we come back, we're probably going to have a weekend chat and see what we're up to at the weekends and how, and have a continue on this chat. I'm on with Tilly Brooks if you're here, and we'll catch you in about 10 minutes. Here's the news.
This episode of Teachers Talk Radio has been made possible with support from Witherslack Group, the UK's leading provider of SEN education and care. They're here to support you too through an ever-growing offer of free resources, including webinars, podcasts, articles, and events aimed at supporting teaching professionals like you. Visit their website at www.witherslackgroup.co.uk to find out more.
If you're listening to this, then we know we share one thing in common: a passion for the type of outstanding education that every child deserves. That's what makes us the leading provider of specialist education and care. We need people like you to help us achieve even more. With us, you'll be given all the resources and support you need, offered a clear path to career progression, and be rewarded with some of the best salaries and benefits the industry has to offer. We are Witherslack Group. If you'd like to find out more, we'd love to hear from you. Visit www.witherslackgroup.co.uk/careers and be part of our future.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
The Scotsman reports on strike action by Scottish teachers planned to take place in the coming weeks. Scottish Education Secretary Shirley-Ann Somerville has said there is no separate pot of money to fund an improved pay deal for school staff, and that any improved pay offer would involve diverting cash from other areas. Strike action was announced after recent ballots and will be the first such action for almost 40 years. School staff are due to strike on November the 24th, after members of Scotland's largest teaching union overwhelmingly voted in favour of the industrial action. The EIS union said 96% of its members backed the action via a ballot, which saw a turnout of 71%. The most recent offer of a 5% pay rise was rejected 3 months ago. Ms Somerville told the Scotsman that she was absolutely determined to try to reward staff with a pay rise closer to the 10% being sought by unions, but warned it would lead to difficult decisions in other areas. In Wales, school children have been given the green light to support their national team in the group game against Iran. The Welsh Government has agreed to let schools decide how to manage the timetables during the game, which kicks off at 10 a.m. on Friday the 25th of November. The team is in the nation's first World Cup for 64 years. The FA of Wales has organised a Football Friday for the day of the Iran game. Around 1,100 schools throughout the country are preparing for a full day of football activity. The Welsh FA has created packs including bunting, footballs, flags and posters to mark the event. Skills sessions, inter-school matches and football festivals are also planned for either side of the Iran game. Pupils in both primary and secondary schools are planning to take part in the events. FE Week focuses on the efforts of colleges across the country that have been instrumental in helping refugees from the war in Ukraine build a home away from home in the UK. Since the war began, around 7 million citizens of Ukraine have left their homes and almost 150,000 have found sanctuary in the UK. The country's colleges have dedicated their efforts to laying on ESOL courses to help refugees master English, as well as other learning opportunities designed to help Ukrainians settle in. Whilst numbers vary from area to area, some colleges have signed more than 100 Ukrainian students onto courses. And not just for ESOL. At least 1,200 students are on A-level or other post-GCSE courses. But it's not just about teaching English. College staff have also worked to provide other practical support, such as free bus passes, lunch vouchers, and loaned laptops. The full story can be found on the FE Week website. Finally, a new resource for secondary school-age pupils has been launched to encourage young people to consider a career in the veterinary professions. The British Veterinary Association has endorsed the Vet Team in a Box resource, produced by University of Liverpool. The resource is designed in line with the Key Stage 3 national curriculum and helps students participate in scenarios which aim to demystify the veterinary professions and remove perceived barriers to joining. The resource will be available later this month. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello! This week let's talk gadgets and tech that helps us teach, but also might be something to hint at for a gift in the near future. Before I start, I'd like to define tech as anything that's been made that makes a difference to how we interact with the world, usually for the better. A pencil or scissors, for example, are classed as tech in my definition. That being said, let's look at what a few internet searches have brought up as must-have tech for teachers. Mini whiteboards, a favourite of Nathan Ginn, have got to be super useful. Things to watch though is pens running out. Do you also need a cloth or a board rubber? And primary teachers, don't let the kids keep them in the trays with the books. They make them look messy and get ink all over them. Interactive screens. Are you team interactive, or could you have had a big TV and spent the rest on other things? I love interactivity, but my subject lends itself to it. Are you simply presenting on an overpriced screen? Things to check out are open source interactive software that's compatible with different devices. Sometimes you can be locked in by software. Having something you can use on almost any board might be for you, especially if your school has a mixed estate of kit, and as it's open source, it will be free. The presentation clicker is a classic. Things to watch for is losing it, leaving the USB dongle behind, and also ensuring you don't use the built-in Class 3 laser to blind the class. Does anyone really use a laser pointer? A webcam, a topic I've discussed in the past. A decent webcam nowadays doesn't need to be expensive and can do as much as a visualizer. Think purpose and audience, then think desk space and the number of cables needed. What about simpler gadgets? Feedback stamps. With these, I'd just be certain the way feedback is given isn't going to change before you buy them to get value for money from the stamp. Ninja pens. Is it a ruler? Is it a pen? No, it's a spirit level and also a flat and cross-headed screwdriver. It looks cool, but if you get a cheap one, don't expect to be able to unscrew anything unless what you're unscrewing is made from cheese. As always, I'd love to hear about your favourite teaching tech. Let us know at TT Radio 2022. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
So I'm back with Tilly Brooke. We've had a few technical difficulties, so thank you for being patient with us. But Tilly, we've still got you, haven't we?
You do indeed.
Excellent. So that's good. So we were talking about audio in a classroom at first, and how noise affects us, and how you can use audio kind of in rooms. One of the thoughts I had just while we were listening in the break then was things like podcasting, or things like listening into radio shows. And one of the things I use all the time actually was when I was teaching GCSE, I'd use the BBC bite-sized podcasts for revision, and I'd have kids download them, and I'd be like, right, go listen to them. Do you think we should use kind of audio for things like, revision or podcasts, or being able to listen in a bit more in comparison to having things like, YouTube or things that are more kind of on screen? Because, we've obviously, I think most people will have seen a lot of the research recently. The amount of screen time kids get is quite a lot, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, I'm not anti-screen time. I'm not anti-apps. I love them. My kids love them. I think there's great ones in use in schools. But there is so much staring at a screen, and especially with young children as well, in kind of nursery and preschool, that can happen quite a lot as a parent. You're like, oh, just don't distract them with this. And the more I think we can engage children in listening with audio alongside everything, right? I'm not saying one is better over the other. The richer their lives are, and the more they can start to understand, in this situation, this is helping me, or I really want to close my eyes and focus and not have to look at the same time. So yes, I am a firm believer that we should have a kind of plethora of things and ways to access revision and learning, definitely.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of really great podcasts I found from the British Council, do a bunch of them, and Radio 4 do some really thoughtful, thinky ones, and especially if you teach, there's plenty, as I said, on the BBC Bite-sized website for GCSE revision. I found podcasts was useful when I did it, or when I got kids to do it, for the simple reason that they could listen to it on the way in. It was one of those things like, instead of putting
flexibility, isn't there, in a sense,
instead of putting your music on the way in, just put your revision on the way in instead. And it was just like an extra bit of time that they could be revising, instead of kind of like, I'll just drown out everything with music. It'd be like, we'll drown out things with more immersive kind of educational content, which is
I think that's so smart what you're doing. You're thinking about, how are my children working, where is a space where this can happen for them that's not going to infringe on another activity, and it's maximizing kind of access to the education. I think it's great.
And I think for me it was I was always trying to think about where could I cram in a bit of extra, and also put almost passive extra, not kind of where they're sat there intently studying, because I was always a great believer as well of trying to get in the extra content when they could just listen to it and absorb it, because it always took me a little while longer to get everything. So it'd be I'd have to listen to it, and then I'd have to understand it, and then I'd have to think about it. So to do that, it'd always take me a little longer. So I always assumed it'd take everybody else a little longer, because you teach.
But you can pause it, and you can go back, and you can listen to it, and I love that flexibility.
And that level of flexibility was always really useful. I did a whole bunch where I'd do podcasts with kids, where I'd get kids to do their own podcast to explain things, and then they'd play it back, and then they'd have it, and that was a great experience as well. Trying to create your own is quite.
I think that is doubly powerful for me, because if you're thinking about the end user, how are they going to understand this? You're suddenly really invested in kind of what's the content, and how can I make it as clear and concise as possible for someone else to consume.
It was one of the reasons I got really comfortable with podcasting, to be honest, because it was like, you'd have so much time where you'd be like, right, we're going to explain this GCSE question, because we're going to explain a series of them in this podcast, and then you're all going to listen into them. And, to do that, you're right, kids had to really think very, very carefully about what exactly they were trying to put across, what answer that would be. And it did really help kind of hook it in, because it would be a bit more than kind of, you just explaining it or talking about it. It'd be more cognitive hooks in that kind of area of the brain, and you could listen to it just dead quick. So 5 minutes in a queue, You don't have to get out all your notes for something. You just pop it in your ear and then it was. And I think that always helped and was similar to what kind of you do with Now Press Play, isn't it? It's just kind of getting that information in a different format, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I am not a class teacher. I was a TA and worked with some specific children in the school, but like what you really want is to make a memorable learning moment, right? Because you want them to go back home or to take it through into a later point in their learning in the future and go, oh God, I remember that. and that's what every teacher I think is trying to achieve, in each lesson. How are they going to remember this? How do I make it engaging and fun and exciting?
Yeah,
there's always a different medium for it.
Yeah, and I think with audio, I always found it really easy because you could get them to visually engage with it if you did that. One of my favourites was always teaching stopping distances in physics, because we'd always create the visual. We'd do it through audio and then we'd do it on podcast and then we'd send it back. And it was always the visual of Mrs. Keep in her car and how many things could go wrong with Miss Keep in her car. You know what I mean? It's like there's several generations of kids out there in the Northwest that are like, Mrs. Keep is the worst driver ever. Do you know what I mean? Because
sounds like a good kid storybook, if you ask me.
Yeah, it is. Miss Keep's worst driving ever. And it's just because for stopping distances, you would be like, she gets distracted, she's got a coffee in her hand, she's got the music on, she's ignoring a child in the back, she's been smoking, she's been drinking, she's been doing everything. And
how bad could they make you? Yeah,
how bad could they make you?
They want to learn and remember it.
Yeah, and it was always really funny when they try and come up with all of the worst ways that I could possibly drive. And then obviously after that, then we come up with the worst ways that I could keep the car, which isn't, which affects stopping distances, which would be, I've not serviced it, I've not done the brakes, I've not, and then at the end of it, we'd have the weather, which would involve me skidding on a road, normally trying to kill a child with a car, and by the end of it, they had a really good image, and nobody ever failed the stopping distance question. Ever.
And it's so important to make it fun, right?
Yeah.
You've got to get that engagement in by making the learning memorable and creating this love of learning, That's what we want, is children that are going to go on to enjoy learning themselves in wherever they are and continue to learn.
Yeah, but it's a weird one, really, because, I see kids now, and I seen one recently who's like, 19, 20, who's been out to university. I bumped into them and they were like, oh, I always think of you driving a car badly. And I was like, really? Even now? The laugh is I'm actually quite a safe driver, but there's a whole bunch of kids.
In their minds.
No, not in their minds. No, in their minds, I am the worst driver on earth. And it's.
I think the podcasting one's interesting as well, because I think with some of the primary schools I've worked with, they've used Now Press Play as a kind of podcasting club, a school club, where they've got the children to write their own stories, record them in podcasts, and it is, again, it's that way of another way into writing and engaging children who might be reluctant writers, but suddenly if they know someone else is going to hear what they've written, it brings a whole new element into why I'm writing and the purpose. So suddenly they want to do it.
I really liked it for it encouraged that. It encouraged, quite deep thinking about the content and also trying to remember that content. But also it really encouraged public speaking as well for those kids who were much more nervous of public speaking. Because eventually, after a couple of attempts, you get very much over how your voice sounds. And then before you know it, you're kind of like, oh, actually, I can do this. And I feel like that was always an important one for the more quieter, shyer kids who could, really struggled with that kind of speaking element. And generally always helped with the vocabulary as well, especially when I was doing kind of more scientific ones. It helped practice that vocabulary so that they could say it and they understood it and they knew what it meant. I think, thinking about how audio affects your identity, isn't it? How the words you use and how you say them, how it builds an identity later. Because you're right, that level of communication, if you've got it, can truly benefit you. Do you think it builds a sense of identity?
Yeah, well, I think sound and language, it is our identity. We use it to tell people who we are as indicators. And I think for children, that's equally important, you know, whether it's through music, you know, that's an expression of self. You think back to your teens, who were you trying to be then through music and sound? Then there's kind of cultural different sounds, the way that we speak and say things and express things. And I think that's really important in schools, that power of language and the sound is given a space, because in schools there is so rich kind of cultures and identities around us.
I think as well as that, I think it can be really useful for kind of breaking down bias and boundaries. I don't know whether you're seeing today, if anybody's watching, we're on the if anybody's listening, we're on the 13th. Today there was a very big article in the news actually about the class gap, you know, social economic class being in effect, and accents and differences in accents being in effect. And actually, you know, when you can have sounds, then you can have that experience of different aspects, different ethnicities, different ways of speaking, you know, and I think that's crucially important. I don't think we get enough of that, do we? Because if you think of kind of a school community, quite often they're very similar, you know, in their accent quite often, because they're all from a similar sort of community. And I think sometimes that can be very hard to not hear the wide array. You know, if you go down to different cities, my sister lives in Birmingham, you know, she's got a very thick Brummie accent surrounded by that type. You know, I'm up this end in the north, I have a slight Liverpool-esque twang to my accent. But I think you don't experience that range. And I think that's important as well, to experience the range of audio in accents that we hear and language that we hear, to be able to encourage that level of diversity, isn't it?
Definitely. I 100% agree with that.
I think you do have that moment where, like, if you don't, if you've never heard it, it can be really strange. You know, like when I was abroad, you used to have this thing where, because I was British, and when I was abroad for the years that I was, you know, around the world, I'm classed as just British. You know, that's it. You're just British. There's no kind of range around the world. It's just you're British, and that's the end of it. You know, and I've been asked more than once in America whether you know the Queen because you're British. There was never. But obviously, if you go down south, I'm very northern. You know, so there is that kind of range of accents, and having the experience of having different noise experiences and different ranges, I think is,
and it not being that you have to be the kind of, you know, RP white British to be the you know, that's what we need to continue to break down, I think.
And I think especially if you've got kind of, you know, the different diversities of a school, I think sometimes it can be quite hard, can't it, if a lot of the content that you're using is in one kind of spoken tone, so to speak, you know, to have kind of the range of different speakers, which I think maybe is an important one to do. I don't think we think of that very often, do we? It's more kind of the range of you know, books or experiences we see, but I don't know whether we think very much about the range of tones or audio that we've got going.
That you hear,
No.
I was listening to, actually, on BBC, they were doing, it's like a radio archives and going back to kind of the voices that were on then. Back in the day, and kind of, you know, that received pronunciation that's very clipped, and you know, it's a lot better now, but my God, I think we still have a long way to go.
I think we do, and I think we do for the simple reason, every time and again you'll watch the news, and I think I watched it recently, and it was like one Yorkshire person. I was like, oh yes, there's somebody from Yorkshire on here. And the fact that I'm cheering whenever I see it means that it's probably not happening as much as I'd like it to.
It should,
yeah, you know, so, but, and I think I do find it, because I've come from such a diverse background of family, you know, nobody's just pure English in my family. Everybody's a mix. So for me, it's very unusual to like, when I was teaching, to be in, you know, very similar tones. And people would say to me things like, oh, you have a very interesting timbre, Caroline. Or they could never quite work out where I was from. They knew I was northern, but not quite where. And it's just because your accent does change and wane, especially if you live abroad or if you're abroad for a long time, so you don't quite have the same tones as everybody else. And it's only every now and again that I'll slip into a real Scouse, that then people are like, oh, now I know where she's from.
When you're around more Scouse people as well, like,
yeah,
you end up reflecting sometimes as well a bit, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's having that range for young people to hear it, so they can hear it and see it and experience the kind of different cultures, I think is an important thing. Because I think you're right. I think that does build identity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I think when you kind of have that moment where you're listening to people, you build your identity around them. One of the reasons I got, we'll have a quick chat about this with you doing a lot of work with autistic adults. One of the reasons that was on my list for reasons why Caroline is definitely autistic was because my mother could remember a time where we'd gone on holiday to like Tenerife or something, and I got stuck in a Cockney accent for a month because the kid I was playing with was Cockney. And I picked up and mirrored his accent. And
give us a go now.
I can't even do it now. But I can't. But I got stuck apparently in a Cockney accent for a full month and nobody could get me out of it. And my mother said it was a perfect Cockney accent, Caroline, and we don't know why you were stuck in it, but we just thought it was one of those things. This is how bad it was back in the day. We just thought it was one of those things, and we figured it'd pass eventually. And eventually, when we, after a couple of weeks at home, it did pass, so we just thought nothing of it. And I thought, oh my God, if you've got a kid stuck in a Cockney accent for a month these days, you'd probably think a bit more about it. But, that just shows you, especially with, kids who are neurodiverse, how much audio can affect us. You know what I mean? It can really shape how you are, and especially when you're trying to mask or mimic. It can be absolutely transformational who you're around and who you're listening to and who you're looking at, can't it?
Yeah, and then as children, it's that peer influence as well. If that's how my friends are all talking, I want to be in the inside group as well.
Exactly. So I think, having, how we affect that kind of level of communication, to make sure we're communicating the right sort of things with kids and how they speak, I think is kind of a crucial one, isn't it? So let's round up in the last bit. Let's talk about some bits that are just generally nice because it's Sunday. And if you're listening in, we're probably going to be rounding in the next kind of 10-15 minutes. So, and what are you going to spend your Sundays doing? What do you do to relax? I always ask everybody this on a Sunday.
Oh, that is a good one. It's very hard to relax with a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
So relaxing consists of on a wintry Sunday. It's quite nice to get a bit arty. I like to get my art on with the kids and get stuff out, and I'm quite messy, much to my partner's dismay. So I love to get like paint all over our hands, or we'll do Play-Doh, make Play-Doh ourselves.
Yeah.
But today we're going on a forage. We're going to go for a forage in the forest.
Oh, very nice. See, I've got an arty one. You've got two. Have you got 2 young boys, or is it 1 young boy?
Yeah, six and a 3-year-old.
Oh, you're at that age, aren't you? 6 is a lovely age.
I've got
very
innocent and sweet.
Yeah, I've got a 17-year-old teen who is very into climbing. So I think it's climbing. It's all about the climb. So it's climbing at the moment, which she's been into for years now. So she's been trying
to like bouldering, or
she does bouldering and top rope. And when she was over in Iceland, she did a whole bunch of award kind of level climbing competitions. So she was one of the Icelandic national climbers.
Wow.
Yeah. It's all about climbing. So I'm the poor mum that sits there with a mat, making sure that she doesn't fall off and injure herself. But because she's had,
I did take my kids climbing, and there's like this big wall that you can go, and then you can go on top.
Yeah.
And he was 5 at the time, and I couldn't get up there, and I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get this child down? But they do it, and I think that's the thing with, you got to trust them and let them to.
Yeah, I think she's quite fiercely independent. My daughter, I've raised her to be one of them. And she was
I like that.
Yeah, she is. So she was kind of climbing and traveling, because we had 2 of us abroad. My family are mostly abroad and I'm in England. So she was being shipped between countries from when she was like 3 or 4, and she's been climbing all the way through. So she'll be kind of like fine tuning it, but she did a bit of a of a travelly run over the summer holidays, and she started a British college now instead of being in Icelandic school. We've had a transitional period, so because of that, she's had to take some serious time to get used to the transition. So she's just picking up her climbing again, and she's absolutely furious that her hand strength is not what it used to be, apparently. So it's all
anything like that strength-wise goes very quickly.
Yeah, and it made me think about kind of like, you know, when you talk about play, like, you know, having that kind of coordination itself is really important, isn't it? You know, I never realised how quickly kind of physical coordination can, you know, go out and not work as much, for the simple reason that it was like, I just always assumed that she'd be, you know, really, you know, intensively climbing and at pro level, like all the way through, because I didn't assume that had been something that would regress. But a couple of months off, and she was like, no, Mum, I can't be a 7+1 anymore because the strength isn't in the fingers. So I think that's why it's kind of like important to get that kind of outdoor space with young children, you know, and be able to practice it regularly. I also,
you know, when they're younger, that always leads into fine motor skills ultimately, doesn't it? You know, if you're being able to be active and use your hands and body.
Yeah, and one of the things I always noticed as well, with raising a dual nationality child in 2 different countries and 2 different schooling systems, is one thing I always noticed as well, that I wonder what it is with us or what it is with them, is that the Icelandics, they have no boundary with throwing a kid outside. Like they do not care. Like,
but there's no such thing as bad weather. It's just bad clothes.
Yes, right? that is the definite.
That's what we've got wrong here in England. I think we go, oh, it's bad weather, keep them in.
Yeah, so like she was like 2 or 3, and even now, like she thinks it's hilarious that I think the weather is bad, having lived there for the last 5 years, because we co-parented, me and my ex-husband, and like, we had this moment where, like, I remember she was like 2 or 3, and they put them in like a full-blown, like what they call a wetsuit, which is basically like a giant kind of waterproof gear, dungarees, and a hat and a set of waterproof gloves. And like it'd be snowing in depth and freeze, and they'd throw them outside. They just... And afterwards, I would spend a bit of time at some of the Icelandic nurseries, because my her grandmother was the head of she's a child nursery, and they have like little rooms that they just hang up all the wet gear and take off all their shoes, and then they go into school. And then outside in the wet rooms, they just put them all back on and throw them all out. And I've seen it enough that I was like, yeah, okay, I'll throw you out, you know, with all the other kids. And then now she's just, you know, she's quite fiercely independent on outdoors itself, and she really loves the outdoors. But I often found that made a lot less time than being indoors on screen.
Yes.
You know, she was always outside, up a tree or in something, and it was kind of like fine, because you can just get out, and it doesn't matter what the weather is, just put your rain gear on, out you go. Whereas for us, I think we do keep our kids in a lot, don't we? You know, they don't necessarily have time to play out as much, I don't think.
Yeah, and in the city as well, it's like, you know, there's not that many green spaces sometimes for you to go to. And
and I think that can be really effective. But, you know, for her opinion, I do wonder whether they've got it right or whether we've got it wrong. I'm not sure. But I do think that when I'd see it, you know, when she was older, I'd send it out. Now she's back. You know, she'd walk home like from school in like full on blizzards, like the kind of thing that I can't stand up in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember her going swimming when she first moved over to go to Icelandic high school to get a dual nationality, and also to learn Icelandic well. And she went swimming, and all the kids had gone swimming. And I remember ringing her. She'd only been in Iceland about maybe 6 months. And she rang me and she said, oh, Mum, she said, I've come out of swimming and I'm walking home. My hair is frozen. And it was like, And it literally was like frozen. It was like she could poke it upwards. It was that frozen. And she was just like, and I was like, are you okay? This does not look healthy or good. And she was like, all the kids are walking home with frozen hair, Mum. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, nobody thinks that this is crazy other than me. And now she's like, absolutely. She thinks, now she's like, why are you putting that many layers on? Now she's like an Icelander who wears shorts in the middle of like a full-blown storm, who thinks that everybody's...
There's a lot of research, isn't there, around people swimming in cold water and the health benefits and well-being. And
yeah, there is.
And being connected with nature and outdoors. And
I found...
we are part of nature, aren't we, you know?
Yeah, and I did find that what was really strange was I found that their attitudes, like a lot of the Scandinavian attitudes towards things like social media and online use and kids having social media, is very different than our teenagers.
That's fascinating, isn't it? Yeah.
They don't tend to be very big on social media at all. You know, they're really not. They're very reserved with it. They see it as a bit, how do I put it? It's a bit... I don't know what the word for it is. It's a bit unfashionable to put your whole life on social media. You're supposed to, you know, to their teens, it's not a thing you do. It's, you know,
I can see that as a very healthy approach, especially as a teenager. You know?
Yeah. So, but they do a lot of outdoor sports, but they have a lot of play. So they have a lot of outdoor play. School doesn't really start till 7. It carries on till 21. For college.
It's such a different approach, isn't it? Yeah,
and
the power of play.
Yeah, and they have a lot more play, and on top of that, I think they have a stack. Not only a lot more play in the primary years, and they're not starting official school until much later, but also the after-school clubs. They have a huge amount of after-school clubs. You know, for everything from climbing to art, and most of it's subsidised, so nobody ever pays for it. And they have a whole bunch of working programs over the summers, so all the teenagers have a longer summer. They have like 3 months. It's crazy.
But they're engaged in something.
Yeah, they have like 3 months, but they do a working program, so they often get ascribed to during those months to go work at things like we would have for councils, like picking up litter and mowing gardens and things like that.
Right.
And then they get paid employment during the summer. Every teen does it from like 13 upwards till like I think it's 16, and they all do that. They're so much more outdoors and playful than we are. And she's found it odd coming back to Britain because it's like...
I can imagine. I mean, I just love that approach and the way that they did it.
Yeah. Really she's found it quite unusual to come back to Britain, because one of the first things she said is like, well, where do all the teens go, Mum? And you know what? I didn't really have an answer. I was kind of a bit like, I don't know, actually. You know,
they hide away from parents and they're online.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, maybe. And it was like, well, where do all the teens go? And you know, I asked some of her friends recently, and she was like, well, we used to go to McDonald's, but now they have a cutoff for how long you can hang around a McDonald's. And I thought, oh God, that just kind of sums up the world.
That's why those programs you just mentioned sound so magnificent, right? You know, you're engaging people and helping them to see themselves as part of society and a contributor.
Yeah, I think they are. But, you know, the question is, you know, I often say when people say, wow, that sounds amazing, I'm like, yeah, but, you know, Iceland is like the population of Liverpool stacked into a country the size of Britain. So, you know, they've got a small population enough to do it, as a lot of the Scandinavians do. You know, how would you replicate something like that in Britain itself? We're a big country with a lot of people. But I do think, you know, there's been a lot of talk recently, haven't there, on extending the school day regarding play. You know, could we extend school days and have more play? And I think the first reaction from many teachers is like, oh, dude, we've got so much to do already. Can you not add any more to that? But I actually think that, you know, some of the kind of charitable organisations could be incredibly brilliant if we could incorporate them into, you know, local communities after school plays, you know.
And not pushing all the pressure onto the teachers in order to do everything.
on
top of. I think that's smart.
I think we could probably have more of that, couldn't we? Organisations coming in and being like, well, we'll provide this hour's worth on this day a week, or we'll provide this particular after school club for this. And then provide kind of enriching, playful kind of activities that aren't dependent on teachers doing it all. Because I do feel like sometimes it is like, how many things can we add to this list? But if we did that, we would have more zones for them to be in. Because the kind of youth centre culture is long since died, I think, hasn't it?
Yes, sadly, yes.
Especially for teens. And I think that, being able to have those playful opportunities for teenagers are just as important. What do you think about that? Do you think teens get the opportunity to be playful?
No, I think they're not given it, and it's harder for them to access it because you're beginning to become a bit more self-conscious. So if it's not there on a plate, then they're not going to do it. And if it comes occasionally, they're going to refuse it. But if we can access in more creative ways, like you've just suggested, then why wouldn't you? And especially with the current kind of economic crisis looming, having more spaces where people can go and have a sense of community and be warm and do activities is so important. My son has just started a football club, a guy called Bobby Kasanga, and this guy's amazing. Like he's an ex-gang member. He went to prison. He came out and he just said, I want to help the children in Hackney have positive role models. Like, I want them to know that they can achieve and that they're great. And so he created a football club, and you don't have to qualify in order to join the team. You can be any child and join, no matter what your skill is. And they create amazing footballers in who've gone through to their first team. But it's about giving the community access to being playful and seeing positive role models.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's linked into all those opportunities as well, I guess, with sport, isn't it? Sports, creative opportunities, enriching activities. I'm always a big fan of doing that when I do it for makerspaces, for the simple reason that I tend to concentrate on the kind of more geekier, techier kind of kids who want to do, podcast or robotics or things like that. But I always thought that, whole school enrichment programs, whole school after school programs was incredibly beneficial. And it's, if your teacher listening, it's one of those things that the DFE are particularly keen on in that personal development section, having whole school programs that deal with those kind of enriching opportunities. Because I think they matter, don't they? They matter for a multitude of reasons, for, communication, for social groups, for, all of the kind of, softer skills that we don't look at. I think, and I think that they can make a distinctive difference, in that was, interaction and social skills. Also, just in independence for young people.
If you've got role models as well coming in from other organisations, and then children go, oh, I can see me here too. If you're bringing a different, we go back to that cultural identity of different voices and different people. And maybe you'll hook some children in on the sporty thing, and then because they've felt a sense of success and kind of personal growth, and maybe they'll step into kind of, as you said, it's something a bit more geeky next time, and it's a kind of a step ladder, isn't it? Of like, and this is available to you because you've learned resilience here and you've learned this there. So why not try, even if you think you won't be great at it straight away?
Yeah, I think also it's that I think it does. I think a sense of independence is really important for kids to have. A real solid sense of being able to be independent and problem solve and not be particularly too frightened of the world itself, and having those completely separate experiences with different individuals always helps with that, because it's different social groups, it's different sets of people, and it helps you build up that sense of that's fine, you can deal with different groups of people, different things, and you don't have to worry so much about that. you know, along with that outdoor play, being able to navigate things like, you know, your school buses when you primary.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I used to get, nowadays, I wonder whether it's the same, because like I used to chuck mine on a school bus pretty young, you know what I mean? It was like, right, we're going to get the bus. But now I do worry whether we do have a sense of fear.
Too much.
Yeah. Now we're like, everybody's trying to get there by car, you know, and it's like, you know, and things like that help, because I think a lot of the, you know, the biking it to school or school bus systems create that sense of independence, but also the better for the environment. And on top of that, you know, during cost of living crisis, as you said, they can encourage that level of independence, along with, you know, keeping the price of things down, you know, having your kids bike it in instead of actually just drive them in all the time. Because I know plenty who just drive their kids in. And it's like, oh, well, you know, maybe there's other ways to do it. I've seen, you know, a lot, my daughter's college has done it, where they've gone for free buses in and out of school, which I think is a fantastic one to do. But, you know, there's another one about that where you've got to think carefully. And I think we should do, we talked about noise today a bit, you know, whenever you organise these extracurricular or extra activities or things that you can do outwards or school buses, is to think about the experience of how that sensory experience will be for kids. You know, and that's probably why we can probably touch back base with kind of, you know, the thing with Now Press Play, you know, or headsets or podcasts or things to listen to. Because I swear to God, I mean, I you know, I've enjoyed, you know, chucking my teen onto a bus, but she's, you know, ADHD, and I swear she hates the noise. She's just like, I can't deal with it, Mum. You know what I mean? It's like, right, okay. So she's doing it via, you know, yet again, a big set of headset. You know what I mean? Listening to, you know, A-level revision, you know, instead. And I think, you know, just being able to say, right, you know, if you feel it, you know, if you feel like that may be an issue, here's some ways to get around it, is nice to do, instead of just being like, oh, we'll just throw you in, you'll be fine, you'll survive. Just, you know, having those opportunities or safe spaces or quiet spaces within the school, or tactics for managing things would probably not be a good, I think would be a good thing. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think creating kind of mindfulness moments as well is really important, especially for pupil and teacher well-being. So, you know, anywhere where you can either explore silence or listen to a guided meditation, or, you know, just simply asking children to, like, maybe close their eyes and put a grape in their mouth, and how does it feel? How does it taste when you bite it? You know, going through sensory things like that, so that, you know, we just need to slow down. I mean, I know I'm super guilty of it and going on a high speed, and I think, you know, children get that as well. And being able to teach someone to go, it's okay to be still, is going to help you get through all the points in life where it can sometimes get quite intense. It's like, how do I look after myself in this moment?
I think that is a beautiful point to stop, Tilly. I hope that you will have a lovely day and look after yourself and chill and have an enjoyable period for the rest of Sunday. So I'm going to thank you to Tilly Brooke for coming. If you want to get in touch, I'll be tweeting it out later on, so you'll be able to see where Tilly's at. And, you know, if you've got any questions or you've got any thoughts on noise or on play or on any of the sensory issues we've been talking about today, please get in touch for the rest for 2 weeks worth of time before I'm on next. And thank you all for listening today. And thank you, Tilly.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Bye.
And
you've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.